Welcome everyone to this Spinning Your Web session on covering merit scholarship review at the University of Richmond. My name is Austin Kelso. I am an assistant director of admission, which is just a fancy way of saying that I recruit students, I read applications, and I help to make admission decisions. I have been with Richmond for about 5 years now, and I'm also an alum. So I graduated in 2015 with degrees in environmental studies and geography and the environment. And I'm joined tonight by one of my great colleagues, Tom Nicholas. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Tom, and I will see you all at the end.
All right. Thanks so much, Austin. Welcome to the Spinning Your Web session again from me. My name, as Austin already mentioned, is Tom Nicholas. I'm a senior associate director of admission at the university. I am also, like Austin, an alumnus of Richmond, though I graduated back in the dark ages, 2007, and have been working in the admission office since that time. So I've got coming up on 14 years of admission experience under my belt, including not just reviewing applications and selecting or helping in the selection, I should say, for merit scholarships at the university, but several years of experience as well, actually sitting on the committees for the faculty, the faculty committees for our Richmond Scholars Program, which we'll discuss at some length this evening. So I'm really excited to share what I can of my expertise and my insight, share a little bit more about what Richmond has to offer, and hopefully get a lot of your questions answered. Scholarship review at Richmond, because it is holistic, and we'll talk about what that means as we go along. There's always an element of mystery to it, just like there is admission review, quite frankly. It's not always, when you're talking about a selective college admission process, a university with a rather large applicant pool for a fairly small number of spaces and an even smaller number of merit scholarship offerings, you're talking about a situation where things are highly competitive and where we can't just break things down by numbers, which is why you won't find any of our merit scholarships with benchmarks attached to them. And again, we'll discuss that more as we go along, but I want to sort of start there. And maybe I start that in part. I start there in part because we are in the process of right now, these last couple of weeks, really digging into our applicant pool this year and starting to get to know these thousands of amazing applicants. And it's always both exciting and overwhelming in many ways to just see the breadth of students who are interested in Richmond and just how wonderful and unique and qualified they are. I think that most of you here this evening have already applied to the university, so I'll be speaking to you if you haven't yet applied to Richmond. I'll have a few separate notes for you, particularly around our deadlines, but we'll go ahead and dive right in. So we have a number of different merit scholarship opportunities at Richmond. The two that we're going to focus on this evening are the two that sort of our two primary merit scholarships, and those are the two listed at the top here: our Richmond Scholars Program and then our Presidential Scholarships. These are awarded to, as you can see, around 100 total students in an incoming class. So the Richmond Scholars Program includes ultimately about 25 enrolling first-year students, and it's equivalent to, as you can see, essentially a full ride. So full tuition, room, and board. And then we offer, typically, it varies a little bit from year to year, but typically around 75 presidential scholarships, most of which are valued or have been valued in the past at about 1/3 tuition is what that scholarship typically looks like. So sitting right around $19,000 per year this year. We do have a couple of other scholarships to make you aware of, and you can find more details about all of these through our financial aid website. But many of them are a little bit more specialized or specific. Obviously, athletic grant and aid coming from our Division I sports programs, our ROTC scholarship. We have an ROTC program at Richmond, if that's something that is of interest to you or that you're considering. The Bonner Scholars Program that you see there at the bottom center is a program that you would apply to after being admitted to the university, and it has a strong sort of service component to it. It's both looking for students who have a sort of a record of service and who are interested in getting engaged, civically engaged in the Richmond community while they're here at college. You can see that we do have small scholarship amounts for those who are National Hispanic Scholarship recipients. And then a number of our arts departments have their own merit scholarship awards. And you can reach out to those departments directly if you're interested in making sure you're in the running for any of those. I'll also mention that we do have a variety of merit scholarships that aren't available to first-year students. There are scholarships offered by a number of departments on campus that students qualify for once they declare a major, or are able to qualify for once they declare a major. Many of our scholarships are restricted by endowment requirements to specific major fields or departments, and those we can't award until after students have declared a major, which is typically in their sophomore year. So there are juniors and seniors who are receiving additional scholarship monies further along in their college careers. And those range quite a bit in value, from as low as a couple of $100s to as high as many thousands of dollars. So it can vary a little bit. But what I really want to zero in on are the two sort of main programs, the two that you would hear about typically around when you receive your offer of admission, depending on your decision plan, the two sort of main scholarship programs. And that's the Richmond Scholars Program, as you can see, and the Presidential Scholarships. And we're going to start with the Presidential Scholarships and dive a little bit deeper there. So for our Presidential Scholarships Program, I'll go ahead and start laying the groundwork by saying that, we, as with our admission process, all of our scholarship processes involve holistic consideration. I alluded to this earlier, and to the fact that there aren't any benchmarks or cutoffs. So Richmond is not a place where you'll see, if you have this GPA and or this standardized testing, you will inherently or automatically qualify for this amount of money. All of our scholarships have an element of holistic consideration. Academics, as they are in our admission review process, are first and foremost in our scholarship review process as well. But there are a lot of other factors and variables that we're considering alongside that. The other thing I'll point out by way of introduction and laying groundwork is that you will see, as we discuss these scholarships, our standardized testing ranges. It's important to note that this year, in light of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we have moved to a test optional stance. That holds true for both our merit scholarships as well as our admission process. So standardized testing is not required for merit scholarship review this year. You don't need to have requested that we consider your scores in order to be considered for either the Presidential Scholars or the Richmond Scholars program. That being said, these ranges are not specific to the Presidential Scholars Program. Let me start by saying that. The ranges that you're seeing here, this is our overall admitted student profile. So last year's class, the students that are currently freshmen on campus this year, this is the middle 50% range for the students that we admitted last year. So you can see that the typical student that we are admitting is an A- type student on average. You might wonder how an unweighted 4.0 scale, a 4.0 can be the 75th percentile. That simply tells you that essentially the top 25% of students we admitted last year were straight A students. And so the bottom 25% below that 3.68 being typically A-, B+ type students. But the vast majority of students that we're admitting are A type, A- type students on the whole. And then you look at our standardized testing ranges in terms of where our overall admitted student cohort is falling, and you can see those as well. So when we talk about selecting merit scholarships, and you'll see the stat later, but it's about 1 in 9 students that receives a merit scholarship. We're talking about selecting sort of making an even tougher cut, an even further cut among an already very, very qualified, not just applicant pool, but a very qualified pool of admitted students. Remember, we expect to bring in about 75 presidential scholars each year. We award more than that, just like we do with admission offers. We make offers with our scholarships, and anticipating a certain number of students will take us up on those. So we will send out more than 75 presidential offers, but the goal is to enroll 75 presidential scholars each year. And in order to do that, when you're talking about several thousand admitted students, there are a variety of factors that we're going to look at, and academics alone don't cut it, because again, it's such a qualified pool. So we're looking at beyond just academics. I would say that in general, you'll find that most of our presidential scholar recipients fall at or above the upper ends of these ranges, though not always. Again, there's this holistic element of consideration in the merit scholarship process, in the presidential scholar selection process. But as a general rule, that's what you would see. But again, that's still a fairly large cohort of students, and so this is where we begin to look at things like some of the qualities that you see here. We're looking for things like demonstrated leadership, unique perspectives that students are bringing to us, things that are standing out to us in applications, from students' resumes, from students' recommendation letters, what we're seeing from teachers. Certainly compelling essays play a role in the variety of things that we evaluate as we consider whom we're going to extend these presidential offers to. We talk about impactful presence in school or local community. Again, that's a phrase that could probably be used to describe many of our admitted students, and so it often will take a little bit more, maybe a particularly impactful presence in one's school or local community to make one sort of competitive for this presidential scholarship. One thing that I'll note about the presidential program is that, and actually as I move on to the next slide here, is that regardless of your application plan, you'll automatically be considered for this one. So you do not need to worry about doing anything special or anything separate for the presidential scholarship program. We sort of allot these to the different application plans, including our binding early decision 1 and early decision 2 plans. We do award a couple of presidentials in each of those application rounds, and so I'm sorry, there's nothing additional that you would need to do on your end. If you apply, whether you apply November 1st, whether you already applied November 1st, early decision 1 or early action, or whether you plan to apply January 1st in our early decision 2 or regular decision pool, you'll automatically be considered for the presidential scholarship. And you'll be notified of your, if you are awarded this scholarship, with your offer of admission. So at the point in time that you receive an offer of admission, you go to your Spider portal, you see, you see the good news. Your admission letter will include, will include that information, I should say, if you have been selected for the presidential scholarship, and there will be further information about it subsequent to that in your portal. Moving on to the Richmond Scholars Program. So again, by way of reminder, about 25 Richmond scholars that we're looking to enroll each year, and a quite large applicant pool. We'll talk about the deadlines here in a minute and how exactly that works. But last year, I want to say it was around 8,500 students who were in the running for this ultimately 25 Richmond scholars who we brought to campus as part of our first year class. The ranges that you see here are the same because, again, these are not specific to the scholarships. These are our overall. It's just a reminder. This is our overall admitted student profile. These are the types of students that are being admitted to Richmond. And so, again, it's not necessarily just a matter of selecting the tippy top students from among a whole bunch of top students. It's looking at a large group of top students and selecting from among them for a variety of reasons. So strong standardized test scores, perfect standardized test scores, are not in and of themselves going to guarantee the receipt of a merit scholarship at Richmond. Perfect grades, extraordinarily rigorous curricula. These are all important factors and things that we're considering, but they're not guarantors of a merit scholarship. Because, again, there's this element of holistic consideration that's going on with not just the admission process, but again, with all of these awards. So how do we go about selecting these Richmond Scholars? We'll talk about the logistics of the process in a minute. Richmond Scholars is a more intensive process. It's a multi-stage process, including consideration by faculty committees. And so what you see here is not just something that the admission office uses, but this is what our Richmond Scholars faculty committees have determined to be sort of a general listing of the qualities they're looking for in our Richmond Scholars. You'll notice that not all of these apply to all Richmond Scholars. For example, some of our Richmond Scholars will typically be awarded to students who show exceptional talent in artistic expression, but that's not a requirement for all Richmond Scholars. That's just one element that we're thinking about. You'll notice some very sort of general things that in many ways we hope and believe are true of most of the students that we admit to the university, though we're looking for those maybe in particularly keen ways in our Richmond Scholars students. And you'll notice some things that that sound very academic here. We are a liberal arts institution, a small college at the core with a robust curriculum, and our faculty are looking for students who are thinking about the world in a variety of different ways, who are able to think even as high school students in a way or at a level that college students have to be sort of taught to think over some amount of time. What this looks like practically as we review applications, folks often wonder sort of, how do we find these things, or how do we look for these things in an application? It's not necessarily, again, strong academics first and foremost. Most of our Richmond Scholars, like our presidential scholars, falling at or above the upper ends of those academic ranges, though again, not always. But beyond that, I would say it's not just impressive involvement as one might find on a resume or on your Common or Coalition application. It's not just compelling writing as we'd expect to see from some of these very top students in our essays. It's not just extraordinarily strong recommendations from teachers. Teachers who are sort of overflowing and glowing with praise for these students. It's typically all of those things, and again, all of them in a really sort of combined way. I think it's easy when you're applying to college, setting aside merit scholarships, it's easy when you're applying to college or selective colleges, let's say, like Richmond. It's easy to sort of look around you and compare yourself to your school cohort. And many of you are probably among the top students in your schools in terms of academics, in terms of your extracurricular resumes and your personal accomplishments and all those kinds of things. It's important to remember that when you're applying to selective colleges like Richmond, our applicant pool isn't distributed the way your high school is distributed. Our applicant pool consists mostly of students like you, students who are among the very best students in their schools, students who are among the most high achieving students in their high schools. And so when it comes to selecting ultimately 25 Richmond scholars from more than 8,500 candidates, we're not just talking, I've often said, we're not just talking about, you know, one of the best students in your high school that might qualify for a Richmond Scholars Award. We're frequently talking about, you know, one of the most amazing high schools, or students, I should say, that your high school has seen in 10 or 15 years. That's the kind of student that is sort of rising to the top in this Richmond Scholars consideration process. Logistically speaking, how does that work? Well, I mentioned that there are multiple stages to the Richmond Scholars process. The first and most important stage begins right there at December 1st. So if you've applied to the university already, if you applied early action, early decision 1, or if you have applied as a regular early 2 candidate since then, you're already good to go. Because just like with the presidential scholarships, there is no additional application required for the Richmond Scholars Program. However, there is a deadline. For the presidential scholarships, which we discussed earlier, doesn't matter, you apply, regardless of when you apply, whichever plan you apply for, you'll automatically be considered. When it comes to the Richmond Scholars Program, you have to make sure that your application is on file with us by December 1st. So if you have not yet applied to Richmond and you want to put yourself in the running for the Richmond Scholars Program, which again is highly competitive, but no extra work on your part to again put yourself in the running for it, as long as you get that application in, your standard admission application, by December 1st, then you're good to go. Your application will automatically be considered for the Richmond Scholars Program. From there, there's sort of an initial review of the pool alongside our general admission review of applications as we read those, which results in a somewhat smaller selected group of applications being forwarded on to our faculty committees. The Richmond Scholars are not just selected by the admission office. We have an Office of Scholars and Fellowships on campus that oversees the Richmond Scholars Program for students who are on campus as scholars, and they also oversee the selection process for those students. And so there's a review by these faculty committees. These are U of R professors who are reviewing students, and they will ultimately select typically somewhere around 100 finalists, 75 to 100, let's say. Depends a little bit on the year. Those students are typically notified in late January, no later than February 1st, that they have been selected as finalists in the Richmond Scholars Program. At that point, those students are given the opportunity to submit some supplemental materials, and as well as respond to an additional essay prompt at that point in time. And then those finalists in February, early to mid-February, undergo an interview process with the faculty committees. That's conducted via Zoom, and has been for a number of years, not just in light of the pandemic. In fact, prior to this year, I think my only experience with Zoom had been when I was a member of one of the Richmond Scholars committees for a number of years. Now I'm much more familiar with Zoom, as I'm sure all of you are as well. But yeah, around early to mid-February is when those finalists will interview with the committees, and then shortly after that, typically no later than March 1st, the recipients are notified. Again, as with the presidential scholarships, we award a few more than 25 in order to sort of hit that target of 25 students. We anticipate, particularly given how strong these students are, they're going to have wonderful college options. And while we would love for all of them to enroll, we know that we're going to lose a few of them to some other great places. And so that's how that works, and that's the general timeline for Richmond Scholars. There's one other thing that I'll mention in light of the December 1 deadline. You saw me mention earlier or you saw on the earlier slide and heard me mention rather, that there were a number of Richmond Scholars that we typically, or a few Richmond Scholars awards that are typically sort of awarded to students who have particularly unique talents in the arts. That, of course, is in addition to an excellent academic record and strong academic achievement and many of those other qualities that we're looking for. If you are a student who is looking at those theater, dance, music scholarships that I mentioned earlier, or you're a student that wants to be sure you're considered for that particular sort of cohort of Richmond Scholars, you'll want to make sure that you submit a portfolio via your portal. That would be the one exception to the rule I established earlier about no additional requirements necessary. But if you do want to be considered for those artistic scholarships, you'll want to make sure that you do submit a portfolio. Again, in your Spider portal, you can find very explicit instructions around what exactly each of our different arts departments is looking for by way of a portfolio or a sample to send our way. And finally, something we've alluded to a number of times here. As I mentioned earlier, last year we had an applicant pool of just over 12,000 students. It's been we've been in that neighborhood of 12,000 for a number of years. You can see that about 30% of those students in a typical year are going to be admitted to the university, and ultimately will enroll about 811 students, 800 to 825 in a typical year. And then of those students, about 1 in 9 will arrive at Richmond with a merit scholarship. So Richmond is a pretty unique in terms of what we do from a financial aid and scholarship standpoint. There aren't too many colleges that make the commitment we do on the need-based side of financial aid, where we are both need-blind in our admission process for U.S. citizens and permanent residents, and where we meet 100% of demonstrated need for all admitted students. That's a pretty significant commitment to aid and affordability on our part. On top of that, it is even rarer to also offer merit scholarships, which we do. We're very proud to do. We're very pleased to do. But it's important to note that Richmond is not an institution that is awarding smaller merit awards to broad swaths of our applicant pool. There are certainly colleges out there that award merit scholarships to much higher percentages of their incoming class than we do. We have chosen, for a variety of reasons, to concentrate our merit scholarships in a smaller number of larger value awards. So while we don't offer as many merit scholarships as some colleges you might be applying to, although I'm sure we offer more than some other colleges you're applying to, what we do offer, first of all, is easy to apply for because there's no additional application for any of our merit scholarships. And second of all, tends to be more substantial. Again, ranging from about that 1/3 tuition mark up to the full cost of attendance, a full ride. And so that I think concludes most of the remarks that I wanted to make. Again, I hope that was somewhat helpful, somewhat enlightening. I've been seeing a variety of flashes as questions pour in, though I haven't had a chance to look at any. So I'll turn things back over to Austin to sort of moderate us through the questions, and we can tag team the answers a little bit on those.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and great job. And you all have been sending in a lot of great questions. I've been doing my very best to keep up with all the questions coming in, but you've had a lot, and some of these are really great questions, and I think ones that Tom and I hear each year, and so it's a great opportunity for us to answer them now. One question that has come in, and multiple people have asked it, is, let's say we award a presidential scholarship to a student who ultimately decides not to enroll at Richmond. Do we then reallocate that scholarship to another student? So in a sense, if a student doesn't accept the scholarship, do we then take that and pass it on to the next student? And Tom, would you like to talk about that process and how we award scholarships based on reallocation?
Sure. Yes. And I think I maybe alluded to that obliquely in the presentation, but with both of our main scholarships that we've discussed this evening, with the Presidential Scholars and with the Richmond Scholars Award, we actually are going to, just like we do with offers of admission, you saw on that last slide, that we typically, are going to extend, about 4 times as many offers as we anticipate students enrolling at the university. It's similar, the percentages are not the same, but it's similar with merit scholarships, where, in order to hit 25 Richmond Scholars and to hit 75 presidential scholarships, we're going to, from the get-go, offer more than that, in the anticipation that not everyone is going to take us up on those. So the short answer to the question is no. If a student chooses to enroll elsewhere, we don't reallocate that scholarship, because essentially the fact that a certain number of students are not going to enroll has already been baked into our assumptions when we award those scholarships. Anything to add, Austin?
No, I think you covered it very well. Another question that has come in multiple times is about the consideration for both the presidential and the Richmond Scholars. So students who have applied before December 1st, they're obviously being considered for the presidential scholarship and the Richmond Scholars program. And so the real question is, if I receive the presidential scholarship at the time of admission, does that mean that I have not received the Richmond Scholars? And vice versa, right? If I haven't heard about the presidential scholarship, does that mean I haven't gotten the Richmond Scholars program? And so, as Tom was saying, when you receive your letter of admission, in that letter, you'll be notified if you're a presidential scholarship recipient. If you are notified in your letter that you are a presidential scholarship recipient, this means that you have not been pushed forward for the Richmond Scholars consideration. Is that right, Tom?
Depends on the round.
Yes.
Technically speaking, in the early action round, if you're in the early action pool, or even, I suppose, the early decision pool, because we notify those, we make those offers of admission before Richmond Scholars finalists are notified, it is possible, you could still be in the running for Richmond Scholars if you receive a presidential scholarship in either of those rounds. But if we're talking about regular decision notification, that goes out, to your point, Austin, after after the Richmond Scholars process has already moved along. And so at that point you would not. But no, you could be, you might find out in mid-January that you are, that you've been admitted with a presidential scholarship, and then it's possible that a few weeks later you might hear from the Richmond Scholars committees inviting you to submit materials as a finalist for that program.
And what about, Tom, the finalist for the Richmond Scholars? If you are brought in for an interview but ultimately do not end up receiving the Richmond Scholars Award, are you then eligible for the presidential?
Yes. Richmond Scholars finalists are, I believe, guaranteed a presidential scholarship at minimum. So if you are invited as a Richmond Scholars, in fact, I think the way that it works is that you actually in your notification that you've been selected as a finalist, you're notified that you receive you have already received at least a presidential scholarship, which can then expand to the full Richmond Scholars Award, should you be selected by the faculty committees.
And what about, you mentioned before the relationship between merit aid and need-based aid, and how a school has to balance these two things. And I imagine for students out there, maybe who are applying for merit-based aid, right, by December 1, will also be applying for need-based aid in some situations. And so can you talk a bit about the relationship between, if you receive, let's say, the presidential scholarship, but you have also received need-based aid, how do those two things work together?
For sure. So I think it's important to say at the outset that for purposes of clarification, you do not need to apply for need-based aid in order to be considered for the merit scholarships. I know that policy varies from college to college. Some colleges ask you to submit the FAFSA if you want to be considered for merit scholarships. That's not the case at Richmond. You don't need to apply for need-based aid in order to be considered for merit scholarships. And to be candid, the merit scholarship review at Richmond is like our admission process, is also need blind. So when we are reviewing for merit scholarships, we have no idea when we're making, when the admission office is making selections for the presidential scholars, when the faculty committees are making selections for the Richmond Scholars Program, they have no idea whether those students are have applied for need-based aid or being considered for need-based financial aid. And so it truly is, in that sense, merit-based. We're not factoring in how much you might be able to pay as we consider whether or not to award a merit scholarship. It is based strictly on your academic accomplishments, your personal accomplishments, and all those other various factors that we talked about. But to get to the sort of meat of the question, on the tail end, if you're awarded a merit scholarship, but you also qualify for need-based aid at the university, the merit aid is not going to stack entirely on top of the need-based financial aid. If you've applied for need-based financial aid and you receive an aid package, unless the scholarship amount, obviously if you receive a Richmond Scholars Award, that essentially takes the place of your need-based aid package because it's a full ride, right? So inherently that's the case with Richmond Scholars. For the presidential scholarship, where this more commonly happens, where it's 1/3 tuition, kind of depends a little bit on how much need-based aid you qualify for. So if you qualify for a good bit of need-based financial aid, more than the value of the scholarship, we aren't able as an institution from a financial aid standpoint to exceed your essentially the amount of aid that you qualify for. However, one of the important notes there, and this is somewhat rare, we're not unique in this, but one of the important notes there is that when we replace parts of your need-based aid package with your merit scholarship, we're going to start first and foremost by replacing the self-help portion of your financial aid package. So that presidential would come in, and the first thing that it would do is it would essentially cover the $5,000 in student loans, federal loans, and work study that you would otherwise sort of have as a part of your need-based aid package. From there, the scholarship would begin reducing the need-based grant funding that you would receive from the university. But obviously, if the scholarship is larger than the amount of need you qualify for, it would just replace all of your need and then some, and more on top of it in order to give you the full scholarship amount. I dipped a little bit into financial aid lingo there, which is not my expertise. So I hope that was clear. If you have any additions, Austin, please feel free to add those.
No, I think that was very thorough, and we've had another question come in, and I can take this one, Tom. I'll let you catch your breath for a second. Asking about the ways that you apply, so whether you're applying early decision versus early action versus regular decision, and depending on which applicant pool you're in, does that confer different advantages or disadvantages when it comes to the merit scholarship review process? So for example, if a student were to apply early action versus early decision, are they disadvantaged by applying early decision versus early action when it comes to scholarship review? We do not, when reviewing for these scholarships, the application plan that you applied on is not a consideration for us when reviewing for the presidential and the Richmond Scholars. So you can apply early decision and be someone that we see Richmond Scholar qualities in, and we will push you forward to the Richmond Scholars process. And the same goes for early action. So no matter which application pool you apply in, it won't disadvantage or advantage you. But when it comes to that Richmond Scholars review process, if you're deciding that you want to apply on the regular decision deadline, just make sure that your application is in before December 1st. Because if you don't apply by December 1st, you will not be considered for the Richmond Scholars Program. We also have had questions about the Richmond Scholars Program itself for the students who are selected. Obviously, there is a merit award component to this, but there's also a sense of community that goes along with being a Richmond Scholar. Tom, could you talk about some of the things that, or some of the benefits of being a part of the scholar community?
For sure. Yeah, so the Richmond Scholars, program in particular, I think has it's sort of morphed over the years, but there's sort of a long tradition there of a really strong sort of community of scholars on campus. Before we move entirely away from the monetary award, I will go ahead and say that there is an additional, on top of full tuition, room and board, so full ride scholarship. There is also an additional grant. I believe it's up to $3,000 that students can receive toward a self-selected academic activity. So that could be used toward research projects that a student wants to do, or trying to think of some other examples from over the years. I don't know if you have any, Austin, but there's sort of an additional stipend, and that's separate from the Richmond Guarantee, which you may have heard about, which is the summer funding that we guarantee to all students at the university. So it is not uncommon for our Richmond scholars to have multiple summers where they're getting funding from either the Scholars Program or from the university to do all sorts of really cool things in terms of research, whether on campus or somewhere else in the country or the world. There is also a really sort of tight-knit community on campus. I mentioned earlier our Office of Scholars and Fellowships. Our colleagues over there are wonderful. They oversee the Richmond Scholars Program. They do a variety of programming throughout the year, from more intellectually geared events over to some really, really just fun stuff, ice cream socials and game nights and things of that nature. And they have a space right in the Commons where a lot of our scholars will hang out or have sort of a comfortable space in the middle of campus that's sort of reserved for them to an extent, which is kind of nice. So yeah, there's a really strong community of scholars. They'll go on trips together sometimes. I know that the first year students, not this year but last year, actually did a 2-night weekend away, quote unquote, from the campus. They actually stayed at a hostel in the city of Richmond. So they went downtown, about 6 miles away, and spent one of the first weekends of the year kind of together as a cohort, staying in the city and exploring the city, going to museums and arts events and things of that nature, dining out at some cool restaurants. Again, all funded through the Scholars Program. So there is a really cool sense of community that comes with it as well. There are some other perks to the Richmond Scholars Program beyond the monetary and the community, things like priority housing, priority course registration on campus, and a couple of other perks. I think they get complimentary tickets to a number of our performances on campus through the Model Center of the Arts and things of that
nature. Okay, we're going to wrap up here with just a few more questions. Tom, I was smiling when I read this question because you recently wrote a blog post on our website about a similar topic. And the question is, how do I boost my chances of receiving a merit scholarship? And I think it's a question that you and I both hear plenty during the application process, maybe not necessarily pertaining to merit scholarships, but pertaining to how do I boost my chances of admission or increase my chances of getting in. But as it pertains to merit scholarships, if there's a student who has not yet applied, or even students out there who have applied, is there anything they can do to boost their chances at this point? What would you recommend?
So I would say, for students who've already applied, the reality, to be pretty candid, is not much at this point in time. You submitted your application, you put your best foot forward, and we sort of will take it from here. For a student who has not yet applied, to be totally honest, my answer isn't terribly different. There's not a whole lot that you can do at this point to boost your chances of receiving a merit scholarship, simply by nature of the fact that most of what we consider is stuff that you've already done. You've already got your high school transcript, your GPA, your course selection over 4 years, the rigor of your curriculum. Those things are all baked in. If you are applying, with your test scores to be considered, maybe you've got another administration of an exam coming up, but by and large, you've probably already taken your standardized tests. When it comes to some of the other factors that we're considering, your letters of recommendation, your relationships with your teachers have already been formed. I should hope that at this point in the year, you've already sort of tapped those teachers and requested those recommendations. Your activities resume is, for the most part, pretty solidified. Most of what we're seeing is what you've done over the course of high school already. If you haven't submitted your application yet, I would say really the only things that you have control over at this point that you can really impact would be your essays, obviously, and your activities resume, the way you present yourself through that. Though again, if you already applied, you have almost certainly done a really good job of that already, and it's nothing that you need to be worrying about. You know, those are the pieces that are really still in your hands when your senior year rolls around, if you haven't yet when you haven't yet applied to colleges. But there's no specific topic. There's no magic formula for an essay that is just going to make the scholars committees fall over and in awe and award you a merit scholarship. I don't think that you should. My best advice when it comes to college essays is always to be as authentic as possible. So don't feel like you need to come across as sounding overly academic or intellectual in order to make yourself more qualified for merit scholarships, because authenticity is important, and not just folks in the admission office like Austin and myself, but our faculty as well could generally tell when a student is authentically engaged and curious, and when a student is trying to seem overly so with that goal. So I know that that's maybe not the ideal answer that everyone wants to hear, but I always tell students take this with a take that as some measure of comfort. Most of the hard work is behind you when it comes to applying to college and being considered for merit scholarships. At this point, it's really more of a waiting game than anything else. The other thing I'll point out to you is that I've talked a lot about the quality of our applicant pool. And the reality is that we know that there are students that we're not going to be able to offer merit scholarships to, who are going to get wonderful merit scholarships at some of our competitors, at other institutions. Personally, I think that it's a really good thing that different colleges and universities select different students for different reasons to get their merit scholarship awards. Because if we didn't, then the same couple of hundred students would get the merit scholarships everywhere, and that would leave much less for everyone else to be awarded. And I think it's important to note that we know that the vast majority of the students admitted to Richmond, they're going to get merit scholarships of varying amounts at varying institutions. So we put as much out there as we can, and we lay as much on the table as we can. But ultimately, we have tough decisions to make.
Thank you. And we're nearing the end of our program. And so we have more questions coming in than Tom and I will be able to answer. And so I do want to point your direction to the emails on the screen here. And so if you do have questions, follow-up questions, you're welcome to reach out to our office and contact us. We do have a general admission inbox. You can see it here. It's admission@richmond.edu. But if you're visiting our admission website, we also have territory managers. And so you'll be able to look for your area of the country and which one of our admission officers is responsible for that area of the country. And so if you do have additional follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We can make sure that we get your questions answered, if not now, at a later point. So to wrap this up, Tom, I want to ask you for one final thought. If you could leave our audience with one last final thought to keep in mind about merit scholarships at Richmond, what would that be?
Merit scholarships at Richmond. I was thinking just more. If you were going to say more general thought, I was like, well, shoot, I just said that about about knowing that most of you will probably receive merit scholarships various places. No, I think when it comes to merit scholarships at Richmond, I hope that this presentation's been useful. I hope that our candor has been helpful. I know we can't get into too much nuance in terms of the nitty-gritty of the process, and I certainly hope that we're not being overly discouraging in terms of the competitiveness of these awards. But do know, I think more than anything else, that we take a great deal of care as we review your application, not just for admission, but for merit scholarships as well. I'm really proud to work in an admission office that really keeps students front and center in everything that we do. That's true of Richmond as a whole, but I think it's also very true of the work that we do in the Office of Admission. We know that behind each application is not just an application on a screen, but a student and a person, and a unique person. And we don't, unfortunately, have space to admit all of those students in any given year. We don't have, money to award merit scholarships to all of the students we admit in any year either. Though we often wish that we did. But as we review your application, know that we're going to do so with, again, a great deal of care, with time and attention. Part of the reason that the scholarship processes that we've discussed take some time is because there is so much thought and care that goes into them. So know that we are working extraordinarily hard to keep you and your application front and center, and to make the best decisions that we possibly can given the constraints that we have.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you to everyone who submitted those questions. I hope you found the information that we were able to share with you tonight helpful. Before we wrap up, if you do want to come back and refer to this webinar again, we are recording this, and we will be posting this to our admission YouTube channel, and you'll find that posted within the next 2 weeks. So you're more than welcome to watch this again if you want to refer back to any of the information that we presented tonight. Thank you, everybody.